times before, data quality and trustworthy AI go hand in hand. We need to really be thinking about the application of trustworthy AI, and not just as a matter of if it's something that's going to happen in this space, but rather when it's going to happen in this space. Many of you may be implementing AI now, as you move through enhancements and bringing in new technologies into your sanctions compliance program. We can see that AI tools can certainly be helpful, and the debate over whether financial institutions should pursue these advanced technologies, as I said, has shifted from an if to a when, and how they're going to do that and on what scale they're going to do that. And the AI tools can certainly bring about mitigation of many sanctions risks associated with real-time payment screening. It can accelerate the exception processing to near real time, instantaneously resolve exceptions. And I think this is really where some of the benefit can come in, because when we think about the screening in the instant payment world, a majority of the payments are going to pass through without having any alerts generated on them. And we got to move those through obviously very quickly, and our screening should not impact significantly the clearance of those payments for processing. In those instances where there are alerts that are generated, how can AI help to resolve that alert much more quickly without the need for human intervention? So again, going back to those things such as, is this payment of a kind and a size that this particular customer has done before, and has that prior payment stream been cleared? And if the answer to that is yes, then the likelihood is that this particular payment can be cleared as well. And so really bringing about that information and aiding in the decision-making process so that we can speed that process up. So as I mentioned, determining the payments are consistent with past customer behavior, and evaluating data fields of the payment message associated with exceptions to reduce false positives, and escalating only potentially true positives to the compliance teams. So as we think about how that more granular information is coming about as we look at ISO 2022 and its impact on a multitude of payment types and having that granular data, how can we bring all of that together in the use of AI to more effectively resolve alerts in a more quick and timely fashion? And certainly leveraging geolocation tools to identify potential sanctions violations. And these are all critically important in the world of instant payments. And we'll see on the geolocation tools when we talk about the enforcement actions, number of them recently looking at IP addresses, email domains, and so forth that indicate sanction geographies that are problematic from a sanctions perspective. So geolocation is an area of emphasis on the part of the regulators. Another emerging technology is SwiftGo, which is looking at smaller dollar transfers and looking to have, as they note here, predictable payments, lightning fast, a great user experience, and unrivaled reach. So the ability to send lower value transactions globally using the SwiftGo technology. And that's going to obviously have an ISO 2022 format, and a lot of information will be available, and we'll need to be thinking about how we incorporate this into our screening efforts. So when we think of challenges, perhaps just the fast-changing landscape of payments is a significant challenge. There are changing spending habits and methods, such as the rise of account-to-account payments and the decline in the use of cash and the rise of cryptocurrencies. There are evolving payment methods and types, as we talked about the ISO 2022 and its global adoption in 2025 or by 2025. There's a spillover effect. We talked about how FedNow is following closely the ISO standard. And certainly the drive for more data and specifically more structured data will give rise to business opportunity, but will also give rise to compliance opportunities, as that new and additional data can potentially aid in alerting and alert resolution processes. Of course, new platforms are coming online at a rapid pace, and integrating compliance into those new platforms is certainly recommended by regulators, but can be a challenge to the users if compliance is not effectively integrated. And as we talked about in the compliance guidance that OFAC issued for instant payment systems, having sanctions compliance be considered in the development process on these new technologies is critically important, because sometimes applying the sanctions requirements to new technologies which didn't take into account the overall sanctions compliance requirements can lead to difficulties later on. And we dig down a little bit more into the changing spending habits and methods. I think the biggest thing to look at here is the decline in cash. Cash historically has offered several advantages to criminals where they could be lost and those could be lost in a cashless society. Primary advantage to cash is anonymity. It doesn't leave that digital audit trail like an electronic payment does. And the anonymity reduces the ability of financial institutions to scrutinize source of payments, making it harder to trace illicit funds. So in the old days, we all used to think about, people a bag of cash and where did that money come from and what was it for and whose benefit was it for? And that was very much a concern at the placement stage of money laundering. We see that criminals today are employing complex legal ownership structures to hide beneficial ownerships of funds. And in the AML space, the use of cash was a problem, as I mentioned, in the placement or first stage of money laundering. And as we move into a less cash or cashless payment methods, the focus moves from the placement stage to the layering stage in an effort to conceal the ownership of funds. And criminals are increasingly employing sophisticated techniques aided by advancements of artificial intelligence. They're using that themselves to launder money through digital channels. Now they can turn to avenues such as cryptocurrencies and peer-to-peer payment apps, in-game purchases, and gambling to obfuscate their activities. This goes back to what we talked about in the question that came in from the audiences with digital wallets and how those wallets are funded and who is behind that digital wallet. Those are all issues that need to be considered in the casino and gambling space, as well as others. So the evolving payment methods and payment types, certainly we have ISO 2022 as mentioned, which is looking to improve the efficiency of compliance controls with all payment actors being identified with granular detail. It'll also require changes to screening tools to make sure that all that granular data is in fact screened or used as part of the screening and alert resolution processes as appropriate. In terms of ISO 2022, we've discussed much of that in prior webinars, but the key point to make here is that unlike the old format, where there was a good amount of unstructured data in free text fields, which could contain words like Cuba, and that could be confused with a sanctioned country. So now in the new format, we're having structured data, which will identify those countries and cities much more readily and be able to screen those much more readily as a result. When we think about a practical approach to real-time screening, this brings about things that we've talked about before. What are the three pillars of screening? We start by understanding those three pillars of payment data, matching rules, and list data. And as we dig into the payment data, we want to be able to analyze that payment data to leverage better information. We want to understand the content of what we have and what we don't have, what fields are populated and what fields are not populated. Leverage those new payment standards, as I mentioned, looking at how we get more structured versus unstructured data. Implement data governance standards to ensure good data. This is something that's critical. We talked about data quality and artificial intelligence going hand in hand. Data quality is going to become even more of an issue, a challenge, and a requirement in our sanction screening. So data governance standards are truly a critical component to make sure that our screening applications are producing desired results. So we need to think about what data should be screened on a transaction type basis. We need to account for missing data and understand common errors. And we need to incorporate all of that into the data governance process. In analyzing the available list data, we need to understand sources, the data that's available, and how it might be used, what fields are populated versus not, again, in the list data, and how to map that to the payment data that you have. We can be selective about what lists are used for transaction screening, or can we be selective about that? Maybe not having multiple lists that provide the same information included, and maybe including only those lists that are really relevant to the risks that you face. Are the resources reliable and verified and up to date? Those are certainly key considerations when looking at list data. And can the use of those sources be automated? And can you supplement what you already have with additional data such as country corruption risk scores in an effort to bring about a more risk-based approach? So using the matching rules to leverage that richer payment data, we've got to have the ability to slice and dice and include and exclude based upon the data analysis, what secondary identifiers are out there that might be included in that now structured data, previously unstructured data. And the matching algorithms should support a granular risk-based approach that flags alerts by different types and patterns of matches, and to make sure that the new standards present the data, new data, so less reliance on name-only or free text searches, and that we're really relying on that new structured data. And that we incorporate the new data available in the new standards to assist in that alert generation and resolution.